Imagine being 6 years old and being told your mother is dead. You are put on a ship and sent to the other side of the world. You grow up in an institution or on a farm, working from dawn to dusk, never going to school, never knowing your real surname. Decades later, you discover your mother was alive the entire time. She had been told you were dead too. This happened to approximately 130,000 children between 1869 and 1970. It was not the work of criminal organizations or rogue institutions. It was official government policy endorsed by the British government, the Australian government, and the Catholic and Anglican churches simultaneously. It was called the Child Migrant Programme, and it is one of the most devastating institutional betrayals of children in modern history. The Child Migrant Programme had its roots in Victorian-era thinking about poverty, population, and empire. Britain had a problem it called the child surplus. There were too many orphaned, abandoned, or simply poor children in British cities, and not enough resources to care for them properly. The solution was to send them somewhere they would be useful. Australia, Canada, and other Commonwealth countries needed labour and population growth. British children could provide both. The logic was cold, and the execution was colder. Children as young as 3 years old were taken from orphanages, from unmarried mothers who had been pressured to give them up, and in some cases, directly from families who were going through temporary hardship. Many of these children were not orphans. They had living parents. But once they entered the care system, they became available for migration. Parents were sometimes told their children had been adopted locally. Children were sometimes told their parents had died. Neither was true. The paperwork that might have connected them was lost, destroyed, or simply never created properly. Once on the ships, the children crossed the world to institutions that had been promised as bright futures in the sunshine of the Commonwealth. What many found was something very different. Boys were sent to farms and institutions run by the Christian Brothers in Western Australia, by the Fairbridge Society, and by various other charitable and religious organizations. Many were put to work immediately on arrival. They cleared land, built buildings, and worked farms in conditions that would not have been legal for adult laborers. Physical punishment was routine and severe. Numerous survivors have described systematic sexual abuse by the brothers and other staff who ran the institutions. They were denied education beyond the most basic level because educating them would have taken time away from the work they were there to perform. Some children never learned to read properly. Some did not know their real surnames because the institutions gave them new names on arrival. Some did not know what country they had come from. Girls sent to institutions run by the Sisters of Mercy and other Catholic orders fared little better. They were trained for domestic service, taught to clean and cook and obey, and prepared for lives of servitude rather than independence. The institutions that received these children were paid per child by the British and Australian governments. The more children they received, the more money they got. There was no meaningful oversight of how those children were treated once they arrived. Inspectors who visited the institutions were shown what the institutions wanted them to see. Reports back to Britain described well-fed, happy children thriving in the Australian sunshine. The reality behind those reports has been documented extensively by survivors in the decades since. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, social attitudes began to shift. The idea of shipping children to the other side of the world began to seem less acceptable. The program was wound down gradually and officially ended in 1970. but the damage had already been done to generations of children who had grown up without families, without education, and in many cases, without any knowledge of who they actually were. The search for family became the defining mission of many survivors' adult lives. Some spent decades trying to find out their real names, their parents' names, and where they had come from. The organizations that had sent them and the governments that had funded the program were often obstructive rather than helpful in those searches. Files were lost. Records were incomplete. Doors were closed. One survivor described writing to the organization that had sent him to Australia and being told that no records existed for him. He later discovered the organization had a complete file on his case, including letters from his mother asking where her son had been sent. Those letters had never been answered. In 2009, Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd issued a formal apology to the child migrants and their families. In 2010, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown issued a formal apology acknowledging that the children had been sent to a life of abuse and deprivation, and that what had been done to them was fundamentally wrong. The Catholic Church, which had run many of the institutions where the most severe abuse occurred, has never issued a formal apology specifically for the Child Migrant Programme. The Christian Brothers, whose institutions in Western Australia were the sites of some of the most extensively documented abuse, settled compensation claims with survivors, but have never issued a full formal apology acknowledging the systematic nature of what occurred. Some survivors have been reunited with family members after decades of separation. Some have found siblings they never knew existed. Some have found that their parents died searching for them. Some have found nothing. The question the Child Migrant Programme forces you to ask is not whether governments and churches are capable of taking children from their families, shipping them to the other side of the world, working them like laborers, abusing them, and then losing the paperwork. The question is what it means that this program ran for over 100 years with the full knowledge and financial support of 2 governments and multiple major religious institutions, and that the people responsible for what happened to those children went to their graves without ever being held accountable for it.